Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Andrew Stuck from Walk, Listen, Create. Thank you for coming. First off, I have to thank the EU for part funding this event. This is the Create Europe program supporting walking arts and local communities. Walking arts and local communities, we undertook a pretty extensive recruitment drive to recruit some nodes, as we call them, to extend the network of the project beyond the original 7 partners in 5 countries. And the 4 nodes were selected. Of the 4 nodes, one of which is ReRouting in Berlin, which you'll hear more about today because they are going to be hosting this cafe. Those of you who are new to Walk, Listen, Create, of which I know there are quite a lot of people who've never come across Walk, Listen, Create before, we're a social enterprise. We're registered in Belgium and not-for-profit. We support artists, performers and writers who make work on foot or to be experienced on foot. We're one of the 7 walk partners. We provide the digital archive and we also run all the online events like this one. Enough from me. I'm handing over to Lorna, who's going to run the event for the rest of the evening. Over to you, Lorna.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for that introduction, and thanks so much everyone for joining. I'm glad to see we've got a cat present as well. Welcome to all of you from wherever you are in the world. I'm sure we've got quite a range. So I'm Lorna Powell, and I'm going to be chatting with Clementine, Butler-Gallie, and Eirini Fountedaki, who we'll be speaking a lot this evening. And Clementine and Eirini and we meet regularly for kind of curatorial conversations about walking. So I was very pleased when they asked me to moderate and facilitate this conversation about their project, which is called Dissident Paths, and we'll get into that in a bit. And then also to talk about the book, Walk Notations, that is a beautiful book. And it's just been published, edited by Eirini with contributions from Clementine. So a quick outline of the evening. We're going to start with some intros of each of us and of the themes that our work touches on. Then we'll move into talking about the project Dissident Paths. Then we'll get more into the book. And then we'll have half an hour each hearing from 2 of the artists that led events as part of Dissident Paths and who have contributed to Walk Notations, the book. So that's Elena Biserna and Yasmeen Al-Qaisi. So yeah, that's what the evening is gonna look like. As I said, do drop questions, comments in the chat throughout, and we'll get to them as we go. So Clementine, would you like to introduce yourself and your work?
Yes, hello everybody, and thank you to Andrew and the WALC community for having these cafes. I've joined quite a few, so it's a real pleasure to be part of one this time. My name is Clementine Butler-Gallie, and I'm a curator who's based in Berlin. And in 2023, I launched the ReRouting project, or ReRouting. I'll put the link in the chat so you can have a little look. It began as a research question into the potential of walking with others as a curatorial space. And this came from working with many artists who were using walking in their research or in their practice, or even just as their studio because they didn't have a studio space in the sort of changing landscape of Berlin. And as a curator, seeing that potentially walking could be a space within itself for these practices. And so since then, it's kind of been hosting workshops, some walking residencies that are currently based in Berlin in collaboration with 2 spaces, Kunsthof Frohnau and Co-Making Matters at der Statistik. And also then walk events with different artists. This past year, ReRouting has collaborated with Cruising Curators on this Dissident Paths project, which I'm excited that we're going to share with you. So I'll leave it at that for now. And
Eirini, who is part of Cruising Curators.
Yes, thank you, Andrew, again for initiating this conversation and inviting us, and also thanks to all of the team for making this happen, and thanks, Lorna, as well for being with us. It's actually very nice to gather all together in a different context and speak. So I'm Eirini Fountedaki. I'm a curator and writer and editor based between Berlin and Athens. And I'm part of Cruising Curators. We are a collective of curators. I would like to just mention everyone, as I feel like, the work I will be presenting tonight is actually a collective effort. So Cruising Curators has the following members: Bengisu Jaglayan, Raphael Dybert, Luis Leon Elbern, Vivian Tabach, and Sarnd Utamachote. So we started as a collective actually during the pandemic, wanting to create points of contact in public space, which was very difficult at the time. And we actually stuck with this format of creating intimacy and contact in public space. And we have been working with different formats. And so naturally, it felt very organic to collaborate with Clementine and ReRouting for this project called Dissident Paths, which was a huge project at the end of different walks around different topics in the context of Berlin. So yeah, thank you all for being here tonight, and yeah, feel free to also, ask us questions or have a conversation.
Amazing. Thanks, Eirini. So I am based in London. I am a creative producer and a walking practitioner. And I more often than not work in partnerships. So I've worked with charities, universities, and artists, community groups, using walking as a kind of medium for creative encounter and for making meaning within public spaces, as well as critiquing and questioning the ideas and the spaces that kind of inhabit the city. And I spent several years working as a program producer at The Line, which is an art trail, an art walk in East London. So within that work, I was leading, I think I led, I don't know, hundreds of walks every week, a wellbeing walk, but also walks that would focus more specifically on themes like architecture, nature, water, because the trail itself followed the waterways of East London. So yeah, other themes like migration, kind of urban living, photography, trade, history, basically anything that kind of came up we'd explore. And then also I produced a lot of artist-led walks that had a focus on community health and well-being. And these walks really took people into corners of East London that they hadn't explored before. It's kind of an industrial area of East London that historically was used for trade and now has a lot of kind of still kind of commercial industrial spaces. It's called The Line. And so there's quite a unique context. So there was just endless things to engage with, and from a kind of spatial politics and psychogeography point of view, it was very rich, and that kept me walking the same route for 3 years. So it's also, I had this amazing experience of getting to know one specific route over and over and over again. And the wellbeing walk that we did was a kind of a walk that would maybe take you 10 minutes, but we walked it every single week and would always find something new and something different. So now I work at the University of London, and I'm leading a collaborative project that brings together researchers and artists and community partners under the theme Walking, Power and Inclusion. And as a group, we're programming a series of creative walks as part of the Whitechapel Gallery's first ever backyard biennial, and we'll be engaging with the idea of conviviality, which is kind of living together despite difference. So these walks will be running over the summer months in Whitechapel. So if you are London based, then please do join, and we'll be Clementine, Eirini and I will be creating some audio content for Whitechapel's radio, so also look out for that. So yeah, I'm gonna ask Eirini and Clementine just to reflect on any of the themes that their work is specifically touching on through walking, and what you think kind of walking does as an art form.
I would just start by saying that I think from the practice of rerouting, first it was important that the name somehow didn't only reflect walking, but rather finding alternative paths, like rerouting, deviating, thinking of other ways in which to, path build. But also the walking together as a space, there I would underline the together, because the practice, or at least the curatorial element of the project, is really about bringing people together in motion, and so the togetherness is a very important part, and I think always it's been a thing of the idea of a walking artist and walking as a practice. I believe that this walking as a practice can actually be linked to any practice, and many artistic practices may not think of themselves as walking artists, but actually the ability to walk within that practice is possible. And so rerouting's, maybe let's say one of the aims is to draw out that within practices.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, almost, I would say most big like museums, gallery spaces, arts organizations, they are now where you would have seen like a workshop in a program, are now also looking at doing walks. And I think, I'm in London, I'm seeing more and more people using that as a way to engage people, which is amazing because, as you say, like it's a together practice. It doesn't have to be, but more often, I mean, in a creative sense, it has so much potential, and it is such a relational thing to do. You're walking through space, you're walking through time, you're walking like beyond yourself as you move. Yeah, Eirini, what do you think?
Well, coming from like a more time-based curatorial practice, for me, walking seemed like the right medium to actually do things in public space, which, is kind of like inherent in walking. And it felt really urgent, especially with the political situation in Berlin, to actually do something in public space rather than in a kind of like inside the walls of like an institution. Also, after like a lot of disappointment about what institutions are capable of doing and also what forms of gathering they're leading, we thought that, just like to walk together seemed like the right medium. But also, as Clementine mentioned, we actually wanted to invite artists who didn't necessarily label themselves as walking artists, because, many of them may have been working with film or with performances or, even with sound, with food. And, they all found a different way to enter into the, sphere of walking. And also what shaped our project was different paths we took throughout the project, focusing on different thematics. So we explored notions such as spaces as thresholds, trespass and transit, streets and protests, decelerate. This had to do more with alternative temporalities. But also we explored themes such as cruising and intimacy in public space. I think I'm not forgetting anything, Clem. But yeah, I think the themes also define the different paths we took for each walk.
And did you find that any of the paths had particular relevance or resonance, in the kind of more wider social political context?
I mean, yes, definitely. There was, I think just to also like clarify with the paths, like in the project Dissident Paths, we actually had 5 of them in total, and they created sort of chapters of the programming that was over the year. And within each, there was sort of 4 artists, 4 to 5 artists. Is that right, Eirini? And so therefore 4 to 5 walks. Each artist was giving 1 walk. And I think that the project itself came about through a sort of very political response to the time in Berlin. And therefore, each chapter also was sort of a very specific response to that time as well. And I think that all the artists were reflecting on that in their different practices. But I do think that potentially the path that was streets and protest did feel, at least for me, the most kind of the one at the time, I mean, across the world, but also like in Berlin over the last like 2-3 years, a very prominent, one that people really also felt was needed. And I think also was one that was, that needed to be taken outside of the institution, let's say, and was important that it was in the walk format. Rather than, let's say, like inside the space, and just conversations taking place within these institutions that were not necessarily many people were feeling comfortable having conversations, or feeling that they were able to protest, actually. So the walk format allowed for a protest within the protest.
Yeah. And I mean, with the kind of crackdown on the right to protest as well, kind of just walking itself becomes an act that is dangerous as well. So there's kind of these multi-layers of political meaning into it. And I think, what's so special about walking as a medium is that it can kind of hold all of that. I was thinking about different words that I'd use to describe walking, and I kind of came to the word stretchy. And I was thinking that, it can be simple, it can be mundane, it can be something that you don't notice, and then it can be something that becomes so charged and layered and dense. But what is amazing is that it can kind of contain that spectrum so comfortably. And I guess that's kind of what Dissident Paths maybe did, is like stretching it in different directions and allowing other people to stretch and form it into different shapes. And you kind of in the book you speak about the kind of original name of Dissident Paths being Urban Emotions, and I wonder if you could just say briefly where you kind of left that.
Funny, yeah, this was our first title, but this was also before October 7th. So I feel like we have been thinking about this project since like over 3 years ago. I think we started the conversation, and we wanted to, as I said before, we wanted to speak about our times, and we want to do things in public space. And then our ideas got shaped by the political moment in Germany, and as Clementine mentioned, protests became very violent in Berlin. Also, the pro-Palestinian voices became also censored. So things started to kind of like take a kind of weird political turn in Berlin, where people were afraid to speak out, people were afraid to go to protest. People were cancelled, like artist shows were cancelled at, within institutional walls. So we felt that we changed in that process, and then the project also changed. So we felt like we cannot not speak about our times. We cannot not speak about the limitations we're facing as cultural workers. So I think that's when, organically the idea of dissidents came in, because, we felt otherwise it wouldn't make sense for us to do just like a more like emotional project, urban emotions, and it just sounded like it doesn't make sense for us. So I think as we changed, the project also changed. At least that's how I experienced it. And I just wanted to add that in a way, each chapter of the project felt urgent. I mean, yes, streets and protests was, let's say, the most directly political one because it had to do with like political voices, streets, activism, protests. But actually, also other chapters spoke about equally urgent topics that shape the way we live in Berlin, and actually the way we live in kind of all cities right now worldwide. If we think about it, gentrification and like and the way also like social housing doesn't really exist anymore, like, and also migration, that is kind of the challenges of migration nowadays, if someone wants to now move to Berlin, and also the kind of far right politics around migration in Germany, and I would argue worldwide right now. So yeah, I feel like dissidents just became like a tool to kind of speak about our times.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, inevitably all of the different paths are connected because it's kind of in reaction to I guess oppressive policies and systems and structures in place that require that resistance. So yes, all equally worthy. So moving slightly on to the book, because I know the project took place over a year. Was it a year? Yeah, and then the book has kind of come out of the project, but it's not a kind of simply a description of the project. Could you say a little bit more about how the book and the project are separate, connected, what their relationship is?
Maybe Clementine, you can speak more about the traces as a whole, because actually we left many traces after the walks, and then I can speak more about the book.
Yeah. So yeah, the project was a year long in total, but it started in April 2025 with a launch event at the let's say cultural institution that was hosting it, which is called nGbK. Neue Gesellschaft für Bildende Kunst. It's actually a Kunstverein, which is a very German sort of format that has like membership. So the members also vote into the programs. And so it's a sort of typical exhibition space, let's say, with, its white walls and so. And I just want to jump to also Andrew's comment quickly about the idea of, 4% of the UK population actually even entering Tate Modern. And I think that it's important to say that with this project, there was the 23 walks and they happened in the different districts of Berlin. There was 12 districts that actually it went to, particularly for this reason of the barriers that are the access to these art institutions and who's actually entering and how do we bring some of those conversations outside of that context. But we did start the project inside with work by Yasmeen Al-Qaisi, who we'll hear from later. And we did then return at the end of the 23 walks back to the space for a 3-day event. And so we very much didn't call this an exhibition. However, there were some physical traces that were left in the space by the artists that sort of came from the walks. And some of these were like, let's say, props that were used during the walks. There were some sort of performative elements that then the trace was that they left the outfit or the text that was read in the during the walk in the space. But others actually decided to do an event. So these event formats took sort of lecture performances, discussions. There was also cooking by Yasmeen as well, and various other sound performances and so. And the artists were open to how they wanted to leave that trace. So there was no sort of like let's say, curatorial control over what that trace could be. And also, actually, there was not really like an expectation that a trace even had to be left in that format, but many of the artists wanted to. And yeah, it was also this idea of gathering. So, many people joined the walks, but maybe not everybody joined all of the walks, or some people were able to join one and not another. But the idea of actually like bringing those paths together and creating a crossroads was kind of important for us. So we had this event Traces at the end that was, 3 days of coming together and also celebration of what was the paths that were created and the people that were connected over the course of the project. And then there was, of course, the book as another form of trace. So yeah, I'll leave it.
And inevitably, a lot gets kind of left behind, and there's this ephemerality and intentional limit to what can be recorded. And it's kind of, it's in a way, it's durational, it's performance, a walk. It can't be documented, and that's also the part of its magic.
And I would even say, like, of course, we had this Traces event that was 3 days. And I mean, we live in a digital age. Of course, we took photographs, and we took photographs of the event, of the walks as well. But from the beginning, our intention was to just think about what this idea of leaving a trace does in fact mean. And I mean, I was hearing Hamish Fulton talking recently about the idea of the hiker's code being to leave no trace. And of course, there's the materiality that comes into that, like a material trace. But I do believe that maybe through the practice, we were thinking also of traces in a more conceptual way beyond the material. So what is the trace of the memory and the connections between people, that it still can be maybe classed as a trace? And so these were a lot like of our curatorial conversations as we were leading up to this idea of doing this Traces event. Like, what do we want the event to be beyond just an exhibition of physical things? And also beyond even just the 3 days and the photographs of the 3 days.
Yeah, there seems to be like because walking isn't just a practice and it's not just a methodology, it's kind of somewhere between and both and more than. There's this like reflexivity that you need. And I guess I was thinking about the book as it kind of looks both backwards at the project but also forwards. And I guess with Traces, they kind of have that liminality between like something that has passed but then something that is moving towards the future. I'm kind of thinking like a footstep, I guess.
Yeah, I guess for me it will be more about looking towards the future, because I mean the reason why I really insist on like let's make a book, it was really because we just didn't want to be nostalgic. Also, we didn't want to have a documentation book. I mean, the very initial idea was that we will have a leaflet for the exhibition, but then we were like, no, we're going to have a book. And that's why also then, I came up with this idea of like, let's commission new texts that don't necessarily relate to the walk. They are informed by the walk. They interact with what has happened, but in a way that actually travels us forward and invites us to walk together in the future. So in that sense, the book, at least for me, was a way to create new thinking around walking, but also to invite us to keep walking together in the future. So for me, it also it messes up a bit with this idea of documentation, because documentation for a project always refers to the past, while the book actually is like a reference for future encounters. And I will be curious later on at the very last bit of the call tonight if any of you have also other ideas of documentation or like traces, or do you think that a walk is like a holy thing? Shall we just be focusing on the present? Do you have strategies about, kind of taking a walk and making it something else? But yeah, the book itself has a series of commission texts. Some of them are essays, and some of them are actually more, let's say, experimental types of writing, and a bit more fleeting in a way that they escape a bit categorization. And that's why we call them interludes, because they come in between essays, and they also come in a way that they enter and they leave without you necessarily noticing so much. They are shorter, they are sketches, they are notes, they are scores, there are poems, but usually they're like texts that are, easy to read and also not so, let's say, heavy on like information and ideas that essays, have. So yeah, that's the very idea of the book. And I just wanted to mention also that there is something about the idea of like ephemerality and, escaping a trace. And we wanted to challenge that. Especially we as cruising curators have been working with this idea of ephemera as practice. Our practice has been informed a lot by this idea of like ephemera as evidence, which was first developed as a concept by José Esteban Muñoz. I mean, this concept was more in the context of queer communities and how basically, even though their gatherings, their actions may remain invisible to, let's say, the mainstream eye, they do exist and they do persist. So this idea of ephemerality and tracing creates a tension that we wanted to explore more. And I think the book, being an object is the very definition of that contradiction, something that can be ephemeral but also has a material trace at the same time.
Yeah, I'd also link it back to the togetherness, because I mean, with the project Dissident Paths, we had walking together as a method, as a sort of subtitle, and of course, with walking practices, there is this presence and there is this experience that you cannot take away from just being with others on the walk, experiencing the walk, being there. But of course, this narrows completely the audience of the people that are able to access the walk on that one day, or are living in the city, or are able to travel to the city, or what have you. So the book was an important way to invite others into those experiences without just telling them what happened, but rather sharing it onwards to others who may not have walked in the project. So it was very important that the book had its own life beyond actually the Dissident Paths program. And actually it's so wonderful to see many names here and people who I know for sure didn't walk with us. I know that maybe there's like a little scattering of people who did. And so having something that is maybe, of interest, we hope, to other people, and not just because they went on the walk. So,
yeah. I mean, I read one of the scores last night at home, and so I wasn't walking, but I kind of did a walk in my mind, and I don't want to give it away, but there's some screaming involved in one of the walks, and in my mind I was doing all of that. But so yeah, there's also the kind of like taking your imagination for a walk that can happen if you're less mobile. There's still like all these ways to interact with the book, and yeah, the interludes I think do something really special, and that it's kind of a pause, but it's a rerouting, I guess, and they're obviously invitations for people to create their own paths wherever they are in the world. So yeah, I think it's a really beautiful format that you've taken for the book. So any final thoughts on the book before we kind of move into talking to Elena and Yasmeen?
I mean, I just saw Ellen saying that you would get the book for your library, which is very wonderful to hear. And yeah, exactly. And now Andrew's come in just to remind that there is the discount code for all of you who've joined us today that offers the free shipping from the nGbK website from buying the book. And yeah, also I think maybe just a little bit on the format, because it is really a pocket size kind of situation. And the idea is that you can flick through it and you can pick a page and a contribution at random. You can go backwards, forwards in various different directions. There's no kind of linear reading of this, which, yeah, was again part of Eirini's concept when sort of putting the editing the book and bringing it together. So yeah, it's meant to be taken on a walk. But as Lorna says, it can also be read in bed.
Yeah, however you want to engage with it. Amazing. So I think we are going to move on to our section now with Yasmeen. So Yasmeen, would you like to... Sorry, yeah, hi.
Hello. Greetings, everyone.
Hi.
And many thanks for having me, and many thanks for all the people who made time to join us.
Are you currently on a walk, Yasmeen?
I am actually, yes.
Perfect.
Very fitting.
I am. Especially for now. On the move as always. Ephemeral as always.
That's amazing. Do you want to just give a little introduction to introduce yourself and the contributions that you made to the program and to the book?
Sure. Well, most importantly, I am in the city I was born, which is Bucharest. I'm in the middle of Bucharest, and this is definitely a very, very interesting city for anyone who is who hasn't really been yet here, because walking is pretty difficult here and it's made difficult also by the different layers that the city has, the different types of development that the city has seen. It's a kind of one of the cities which were built a little bit to look like Paris, and it's now really patchy. I'm in a very patchy corner. Maybe this is also great to see. This is some socialist infrastructure next to some interwar period homes. And while I was starting my walk earlier, I actually noticed this one building that belonged to a painter and was actually given to the state in the 50s. That was in the socialist times. And it's now in a very bad state. The city suffered from a really big earthquake in the 70s. In 77, it was a really tough earthquake. And since then, the idea of seismic danger, it's been a very big topic for the city. I'm born here, but I was raised 60 kilometers from here on the Danube, and that's another small town which has a very turbulent history because it's a port city and it's one of the first marks of nation-state borders. Before being a nation-state, part of the nation-state borders, and the border itself being the Danube, which is a very important river and a very important mother for me, because it's something to be feared and to be respected, and some kind of body of water that is so powerful and so diverse and so immense and so huge, that inflicts both fear and love, because people settled there because it was initially a very very important source for for agriculture. And all of that being said, that's how my mind always swirls from point to point. And I'm just visiting here because I am a resident of Berlin. These are all layers that appear in my practice, and these are all layers that I don't separate the personal from the public. I don't separate my stomach also from my feet. This is very much how I entered this project, and I'm really thankful to be part of it. And for everyone else who is into walking, maybe of course, the pandemic was somehow locking us, but also unlocking us in that state, in those states of roaming around or being more attentive. And one of the things that I feel have been taken away from me somehow through education and through the layers of what I was describing, both being here in Bucharest, being resident of Berlin, being in exile, and what I reclaimed for being in Berlin was the quality of curiosity and of mixing up things, and the quality of criticism that I can find with also my other dissident friends and colleagues. And that pretty much started a little bit before our walking project, in the small residency I did in the middle of Berlin in Alexanderplatz. Maybe Clementine, you wanna say something about that?
Yeah, I was gonna bring it up because it's still a very beautiful memory of how I first was connecting with Yasmeen and Yasmeen's work. I just woke up one day to an email that was from Yasmeen. I'd just done the first rerouting residency, and got the email that just said, "I am a walking scientist." This was it. And of course, the curiosity gets stirred, and from this, conversations started. And Yasmeen was invited as a walking resident to the walking residency that's the collaboration with Co-Making Matters at Haus der Statistik, that was in a container in Mitte, which, if anyone knows Berlin, is kind of the center point, but it's not, it doesn't give the center vibes of other cities. It's very much sort of like a transient place and under construction the whole time. And so this container was a little like cozy hub that Yasmeen entered with the very open invitation to think about walking and your work. And you came in asking for just a stove and eggs. And so eggs were cooked for people who who had walked by and got hungry and wanted a conversation, or for friends who were coming in. And this was just the starting point, the way to how to create conversation over the simple gesture of having an egg together. And then Yasmeen collected the eggshells across this time, and they were building up in the window of this container. And then at the end of the residency, Yasmeen invited us all to walk on eggshells together. And it was a very, it seemed like a somewhat funny action. And actually it was sort of bodily, like, the precarity of this little shell, but also the feeling of vulnerability in which we all live, and stepping on this, but together with other people. It was a very beautiful action. And so, yeah, this was a first encounter a first encounter for me with Yasmeen's work and with walking together. But it also, connected food and walking, which is how Yasmeen also entered the project with Dissident Paths. So Yasmeen actually didn't provide a walk in a traditional sense out in the city, but was our created us beautiful food both at the start and at the end of the program. And yeah, I wanted to also hear a little bit from Yasmeen about the connections that you have between walking and eating.
So I I am someone who is interested a lot in eating on the go and eating or being able to cook with whatever it's there. Um, so in my youth also I traveled a lot with my grandmother, who is a biology teacher, and she would take us to summer camps. So I grew up going to summer camps and always packing food and eating on the go or eating somewhere else where you wouldn't know what there would be to eat. And getting to know a place through food, of course, visiting the market as well as visiting the cemetery, of course. Uh, these were always somehow my means at hand to understand the place. My grandmother, not only being a biology teacher, but also an agronomist. So we always talked about the fertility of the soil, drying the swamps, and all of these conversations. So I always connected going outside for walks, and then in the pandemic, going outside for birds when I could in rural areas where I was probably the only one out there. I always connected it to the way we eat and to the way we move in life. And I am myself also always interested in how things arrived on our plate or in our hand to feed ourselves, and where fresh water comes from and what that does that imply. But in the case of the container work, my intention was to discuss with people about eggs, because I was in a time very similar to now where I'm pretty broke, because as my friends in Bucharest say, it's very easy to work for multinational companies, but it's very hard to not do so. And when you choose to not do so, life becomes very complicated. And I managed to sustain myself. And in that specific time when Clementine reached out to my absolute demented email to say, where I said I'm a walking scientist, which I am, because that's one of my characters, because I use a lot storytelling and kind of fables to talk about the present through implying different sorts of phantasmatic institutions or all sorts of invented jobs, to debate always about the role of artists in society, doing it like we say around the corner. I was in a phase of eating a lot of eggs because nutritionally that was affordable and it was great. So I decided to make this egg office, and the egg office was the container where I invited a lot of people, and people would sit with me and they would get a fried egg, and they would also bring something over, and then what was left from what they brought, the next person would get, and discussions were developing. There were birthday parties in the container. There were small dances. We did workouts. We wrote texts. We read to each other. We sang. It was absolute fantastic 2 weeks. And all the eggshells were also the result of like what has been somehow collected over this time. I am in a very beautiful park. I'm gonna show you for a second. The really romantic park. The water was freshly drained, and now you can start hearing the frogs waking up from the winter. There are people outside also, and insanely big trees. Yeah, and yeah, I think that answers a little bit the question.
Great. I like how you work with metaphors. I mean, in your work. I wanted to, you mentioned you have many dissident friends. I just wanted to know more about, when we invited you for the project, you wanted to, you know, scare away the fascists by smashing garlic together. This was, you know, that's why you invited everyone to be part of a garlic ensemble, as you called it, and this was the opening event of the project, and you invited us to walk through our guts. So I was wondering how you think about dissidence in your work, and you know, what does it mean to be an artist in Berlin right now and to be dissident, basically?
There's some street musicians in the park. I don't know if you hear them. Um, yeah, well, dissidence for me is simply, of course, not complying to to certain to certain given facts, not to certain given rules. Although mentally somehow my construct is always to be correct. It's very interesting. You know, philosophically, it's a bit more complex. I have the impression that just by repairing something, sometimes you're dissident. Just by like by repurposing something, you're dissident. In my perspective, also the culture of garlic and the whole idea of garlic and garlic being a very important part of my life as my first job when I was a kid for the fried fish, making the garlic paste. That to me, it's nowadays become very important to reroute myself to the beginning of myself, to actually see a sort of a pan, no, like a pan foodie solidarity across different cultures that are definitely interacting also. And I'm looking historically for how they were interacting and why, and how we end up actually eating certain things. So food has been a very important part of my practice as a poet. I am saying that I'm writing together with eating, and I'm writing together with people, and my text starts with a sentence and then it continues with a sort of communal contribution from all the people that surround me. So I have the impression, and I want to give this feeling to people, that art is a little bit beyond these kind of constructs where we are supposed to comply with certain rules. We're supposed to be from certain class. We're supposed to be from certain background. We're supposed to give society something certain that has something to do with power. You know, it's already very dissident to act when you're doing something you're not supposed to, you know, by existing, by your own nature, by just your presence. And I think my contribution with the garlic, and then further also with the semolina porridge, I wanted to bring humor and hope in this whole disastrous scenario. And that continues. It is a bit beyond the text, and it is beyond the artwork as something containable, and it is beyond art world as being stoppable, you know, and as being commercial. So it is not something you can grasp. It is very much like a microorganism in the swamp, or microorganism in the Dead Sea, you know. It's called the Dead Sea, but it's not dead at all. So I would say, yeah, metaphors are inherent to my speech. My family, my mother's family is full of teachers, and my dad is a geologist. So we kind of operate a lot with metaphors. And I am hanging out a lot with scientists to try to understand certain things, because I don't see myself as one. I see myself as a dissident to all of the sciences I'm flirting with.
Yeah, that kind of flirtation with scientists, and you mentioned you have your kind of characters, these walking scientists, and the use of metaphors in your writing in the book. I guess I'm seeing these literary tools ways in through writing and through language, to tell stories and to tell tales. And I guess I was wondering, how do you move between the metaphors and these characters and these kind of literary functions, and then in your contribution to the book, you then take it to solidarity to the Palestinian people and considering all this loss caused by the ongoing genocide. And yeah, I guess my question is, could you share a bit more about that process of moving between them and why that's important to you?
I think I can actually directly move a little bit to the text. I wanted to surprise you a little bit at some point, and I wanted to show you my feet, so I think I can do that. I don't know if you hear the frogs. I wanted to show you my feet while I'm reading the text. I'm just gonna read you a little bit of the text, and then if someone has a quick question or a few questions, I could maybe briefly say more. I think your question was huge, and I think the text will solve that issue a little bit.
Yeah.
So, boop, beep, boop, 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 beep, boop, boop. Yup,
We can see them.
you can see my feet
Mm-hmm.
in the park. Okay, so thank you for bearing with me, and I'm gonna read to you To Walk Inside of Your Own Stomach, How Not to Not Know. It starts with a quote that I'm not specifying who is it from, but is from my own consciousness. This country owes me, and it makes me also feel complicit. Donaustrasse, which is the Danube Street, winter 2020, 2018. It was a time also, I'm gonna make a parenthesis, when I was just thinking that by being in Germany itself and walking around its street and being one of its citizens, I'm complicit to its policies. Rumen reticulum omassum, abomassum. These are the first stomachs of a deer, the ruminating four rooms to think of. The Gaia in my stomach reminds me of the ones before me, who passed into non-life and whose presence is still to be felt because of the actions of their lives. I walk inside that feeling, getting up to be many, to be with many, on a scale from hunger to joy, survival to joy. I am also a descendant of Palestinians. That was another parenthesis. The Gaia in my stomach reminds me of the ones before me, who passed into non-life and whose presence is still to be felt because of the actions of their lives. I walk inside that feeling, getting up to be many, to be with many on a scale from hunger to joy, survival to joy. To walk inside your own stomach is to eat and cook yourself. A wide range of curiosities, cravings, callings are cooking into rumination. A wide range of microorganisms are cooking you. Make sure you listen and follow. To write about that, to overwrite it, is to risk killing it. Risking to kill a strategy for testing a bad egg. You know, when you put a bad egg, or when you put an egg into water and it floats weirdly, then that's how you test an egg. To write about that, to overwrite it, is to risk killing it. Or telling how hot a chili pepper is by looking at it, how to foresee a garlic too strong to eat raw. Some garlic is really not healthy for you to eat raw because it can actually damage you, but mostly it doesn't. And you can test it also simply by chewing it. And if it kicks too much on your tongue, then don't do it. Thus, practice so as not to forget. And you might get to things you did not know you knew. So basically, if you just pay attention to your body while you're cooking, you might discover you know things you didn't know because they are transmission. I retract my upset stomach in a region where my favorite apples grow. My favorite apples do not exist. And that is not an euphemism for an allergy or a food preference. They simply make me release more air than I can hold. This is definitely a metaphor for flatulation. Every second sentence, I ask, how many poets do we need to stop a genocide? Every second sentence, I ask, how many poets do we need to stop a genocide? I can't hold it. Meaning it's so important to say that it just turns you into saying it almost like as if it was a fart. Caught between narration and aphorisms that keep me on my own little stage where, as I was taught, I'm supposed to speak only when I have something interesting to say. I play poet. My own little world is at war. And as I childishly want to defend it, it gets eaten by fascists. Every second sentence, I ask, how many poets do we need to stop a genocide? I can't hold it. I think I can stop here. Here, I can stop.
Thank you so much, Yasmeen. That was beautiful. Yeah.
Please tell me things.
I liked how you kind of played with the text as well, like reading, rereading, and going back a little bit. And yeah, it's a completely different experience hearing it whilst you're walking as well. Thank you. You're getting a lot of love in the chat as well.
Thank you. Well, I'm just channeling the love. The text itself is also very much about the feeling of being prey, channeling the idea of being prey in a kind of a cycle. And this has been very hard to write because itself, the way identity is given to people, it's projected on people. It has a lot of cracks where truth leaks through. And it's very complicated to hold it and to fix the cracks or to catch what is cracking around you. Meaning that metaphors are a force to go through different identity crap, so to say, pardon my French. But on the other hand, it is just very difficult to be very blunt. It's become, modernity makes it difficult for us to be blunt. And I cherish that, and I have learned that from my people.
Yeah, all the food and digestion and kind of bodily function metaphors, I think, are particularly helpful to kind of help digest feelings and process feelings and experiences as well. Yeah, and also, I mean, those metaphors that we use around the body, we use so often that we don't even notice it, but it's a way that we think through things, you know, when you're saying like, I've got butterflies in my stomach, or I, you know, there's so many kind of bodily metaphors that we use, but because we can't talk about what we're actually feeling, or we can't even comprehend it. So we turn to other lighter things or more familiar things, I guess.
Absolutely. But walking on eggshells sounds sweet, no? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, it's gonna sound funny. But what it is about is this feeling of the what you're walking on, what is beneath you is very thin.
Yeah.
And I think the most important also for us right now is to keep, I think, to keep educating ourselves on what it really means, what are the terms we're operating with, and what it really means beyond the empires that are like eggshells cracking, beyond what we're supposed to know, beyond what we're supposed to tell, what we're supposed to give further. And it's been very complicated always to be in Berlin, not only now or in Germany at large. It's been very complicated to be in the West because there is a lot of cleanse of language that goes all the ways. And it's very complicated to formulate, no? To find the space to formulate something so simple as Free Palestine. It's just beyond comprehension how much trouble it can get. It can create when it's supposed to be as simple as beyond morals. It's like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like a good place to pause. No more words needed than Free Palestine. Okay, so I will invite Elena to join us.
I'm here.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
So Elena, would you also like to kind of give a little introduction to yourself, your work, and how you've been involved in this project?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm only at home, so I really enjoyed the walk proposed by Yasmeen. But maybe I can still show you a little bit my borg. Yeah, that's the view from my window. I'm in Marseille, in Noailles, so in the city center, South France. And I am a researcher and curator. I've been focusing on listening for many, many years in connection with the three main themes. The first one is walking. And for me, walking practices has always been in sound and listening as I've always been a filter to think more in general about the dynamic of the arts in the public spheres and the connection, interaction between the arts and social issues, political issues, and walking as a way for the artist to get out from the context of our production and reception, to engage with the everyday and to engage with the social life. So this is really connected with the whole project Dissident Paths and what Eirini and Clementine were saying before about the origins of the project. And I've been working a lot also on feminist practices and theories connected to listening and on geopolitical borders and the politics of voice as well. So these are my main areas.
Amazing. And you have written 2 scores for the Walk Notations book. Do you want to just say a little bit about those 2? Because I know they happened at different times.
Yeah. Well, I'm not supposed to, I'm not an artist, so I shouldn't be writing scores.
I know.
I came to writing score through another very long project of mine, which is Walking from Score, which is actually a curatorial project that I started many, many years ago in 2013 in Bologna, the city where I was living. And it started on the occasion of an invitation I got from a festival in Bologna, which was in multiple venues, and they invited me to do a specialized theory intervention. So basically, what was clear to me, I just finished my PhD. I didn't want to have a talk. I didn't want to do something theoretical. And since I was already working on walks and walking in relationship with listening and sound, I decided to, I also wanted to extend an invitation to the public and not to have a time and space for my own intervention, but rather dilute my intervention into the, in between spaces and time in the festival. So I decided that the score, I had this idea of working with scores, imagining that the score would be an ideal medium in order to do this, because the idea was to collect scores by artists, non-site-specific walking scores by artists, and to distribute photocopies of the score to the public as they get out from one venue to go to the next. So the idea was to create a collection and reactivate the collection by distributing the papers to the people in order to invite them to reenact the score during their trajectory from one place to the other. And at the beginning it was supposed to be a very small project, and it lasted for many years. And I'm really grateful to this project because it was really important in redefining also how I work and connecting much more clearly theory and practice for me. So I had a budget of 40 euros, and I decided to, give myself a deadline. I said, I can work on the collection for 3 days maximum. And I already knew some scores by artists involved in working, mainly from the 60s and from the Fluxus collection network of people. But in 3 days, I had already found more than 30 scores. So I realized that actually scores for working were still a thing and were still relevant in the arts today. And that was the beginning of working with score with many different groups of people, many different contexts and places and cities for all these years. I still keep doing it. And so, well, basically the project was an hybrid project that took the form of, takeaway exhibitions in some places, but mainly performative intervention, workshop situations, collaboration with groups of people in the places where I went. And at a certain point, since I was invited to make a book, the thing was becoming more serious because, I'm always afraid of books because they look so definitive. I mean, they define, as you were saying before, while they are not, they should be considered like a sort of, you just put together what you're working and what you've been working up to now. And then, things might evolve, and in any case, they will evolve. So I was making the book and I was starting to ask myself questions, especially about the fact that none of the scores that I had in my collection, at that point, I had 100 scores, around 100 scores by more than 60 artists active from the 60s to nowadays in the field of visual art, in the field of music, in the field of architecture, choreography, dance, performing arts, literature. So none of these scores that I had really took the politics of the body in public space into consideration. So I felt the need to write a score starting from my own position, which is that of a cisgender white woman. And so I started to question, the idea of walking as something which is democratic and accessible to everyone. And because first of all, it is not, there are so many bodies that cannot walk. And then when, if, how we walk is strongly determined by things like our gender, our sexual orientation, the fact of having certain documents or not, the fact of being racialized or not, our health state, our age, our contingent situations. And so I wanted to write something starting from my own position, and so considering gender relationships in public space where we walk, especially at night. And that's how I wrote my first score in 2018. And then I started to really look for other scores that took the politics of the body into consideration in the scoring process. And I also sometimes collaborated with artists that made performances but didn't conceive them as score or didn't imagine them as scores, and we wrote them together. So some of these scores are in the book that finally I made. And then, the occasion came to write another one. And finally, I started to also use this score in collective situation, working with groups for another project, which is called the Feminist Step, that I had the occasion to do with Eirini twice, once in Athens and once in Berlin during Dissident Paths. And yes, so that's how the scores came out. They came out from an urgency to take into consideration and reflect together through practice and through togetherness about our sexualized bodies and their position in public space when we walk, especially at night. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this. I think it's maybe I had a question that I wanted to ask about the scores that maybe comes in nicely here, because maybe it's quite basic, but really this idea of what the difference between a score versus an instruction or a guideline actually is, and why do you think that they are sort of being used in walking practices regularly? From now having obviously written many, but also researched many. So
yeah, especially research and practiced many, because every time the idea was, for these gatherings, the idea is that I have a collection with so many scores and we do things together. We try them out in public space and we perform them, and yeah. So I don't think that actually scores are so different from protocols, instruction, recipes, since we're talking about food. I do think that scores are more artsy in a way. I mean, the word score is more artsy and more connected, explicitly connected with the arts. But basically, when you write a score, is to give instruction for making something or for experiencing something. And I was really interested when we were talking about this idea of the book itself, walk notation, and its relationship with time, both with past and the future, because I actually think that scores in general do have this hybrid status, this paradoxical position with the relationship with time, because we often imagine the score. We always imagine this composer at home, imagining, the performance that will happen in the future in a concert hall or in a theater. But if we think about other disciplines such as dance, score are actually archive of past situation. So ways of notating a performance that has already happened as a way to, transmit it to the future. So they have this intermediary position. And if I think of the way I write score, actually my score are based on my past experiences and sometimes of other people past experiences, because I also, when I was writing the score, I was reading a lot blogs and forums that are used by women and minoritized gender identity in order to feel safe in public space at night. So they are based on these experiences, on these embodied experiences, but they are also invitation to, imagine what is not yet, to imagine together a possible different future, yes, yet to come in a way. So, and this oscillation between the past and the future, I think, is really interesting in the score, is what at least makes them interesting for me. And one other reason that I think they are really used, they are still very relevant today, is the possibility that you have not to have an intermediary to address directly the audience. You write a score and you don't need an interpreter. You don't need, you have 40 euro budget and you can still make something, as I did the first time I made the project. You don't need, a big framework. You don't need, so they are really direct, a direct way from who writes to address directly, the audience or the future performers. And then another thing is that I think the scores, at least what I learned from doing things with so many group of people, different people in different situations, is that I do think that they have the potential of become a sort of framework through which you can go beyond what is acceptable to do in public space, what you would allow yourself to do in public space. So they act as a sort of catalyst for a catalyzer for making, experiences or actions. And together this is another catalyzer as well, I do think, in order to go beyond what we would feel appropriate to do.
Yeah, in Berlin also, we got the feedback from many people who joined or walk, Elena, that they felt safe for the first time walking through Görlitzer Park, So it felt very much like transformative as well.
Yeah. Görlitzer Park was an idea that you brought, and I really loved that proposal. Well, first of all, because when I lived in Berlin in 2010, I was living very close to Görlitzer Park. So that was actually the area of the city that I knew better. And yeah, I was more attached to, maybe. So it was, when you proposed that, I was like, oh, wow, yeah. But then it is true that when you proposed, I was unaware of what was going on in Görlitzer Park because, and you told me that, there had been quite a lot of protest around the park because authorities were planning to close the park at night, a park that has always been open at night. And I'm not sure how is the situation now, but when I arrived in Berlin, there were a lot of banners, writings in all the area to protest against the closure of the park. And so, the excuse, or let's say the official narrative of the authorities is the fact that the park was too dangerous and, with drug dealers and stuff. But as it often happens in these cases, discourses of safeness conceal racist or racist attempt to clean places and open up gentrification processes. And we know that white women body are so often, white women's safety is often used as an excuse to threaten or to target directly more marginalized community. We see it everywhere, this, instrumentalization or this use exploitation of women's safety in order to hit marginalized communities in public space, and not only. Even if you think about the geopolitical situation, the actual geopolitical situation, we can see how women's rights or women discourses on women's safety are often weaponized. So it was a site, I think, when we worked there, where at the same time, by walking together as a group of women, non-binary, and queer people, we could challenge in a way this narrative while also working collectively on our own internalized fears and how these fears are actually socially constructed in order to disempower us to go to certain places, to go out at night, to be on the street, etc., etc. So it was a very super nice and appropriate suggestion that you made.
I mean, we thought of it together. I mean, it was just a proposition at the beginning. But I wanted to know more about Feminist Steps, because it's a project basically that you brought to Berlin, and also we worked together in the context of Athens. And it's interesting to see like a project of yours taking a completely different shape every time, because the cities shape it as well, and the people as well who participate. And I know you have been doing that in various cities, right? So I just wanted to hear more about your experience throughout different cities and how Feminist Steps changes, but also maybe more specific to Berlin, if you have something more to say, how was your experience, and if that was like different from other iterations.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean, the fact that it is always so different, and is the reason why I keep doing it in different places, and I will never be tired of doing it. Also, I mean, sometimes making the project in different boroughs of the same city or in the same part of the city with different groups makes a completely different experience. And for me, it is always exciting to discover how things happens. Feminist Steps is a sort of format that I can adapt to different contexts, and it is between a consciousness raising group and a collective activation of scores while walking, because we always start by discussing our gendered experiences in public space, especially at night, and how do we listen as well to each other and to each other experiences, and how they resound, how what we our memories or our experiences often intersect or interact one with the other. And then after talking sometimes for a long period of time, because it can last 1 hour and 1 hour and a half, the discussion, then we go out and we perform together 3 scores, one score by Pauline Oliveros, which is very well known, which is native, and it is take a walk at night, walk so silently that the bottoms of your feet become ears. And then we do together 2 of the scores that I've written. The title is The Resounding Flâneuse, and one was written actually in Athens, the second one. And every time is very different. I did it in Venice, in Brussels, in Ljubljana, in Berlin, in smaller places, San Martino Valle Caudina in Italy, in Milan. And it can take also another smaller place, La Chaux-de-Fonds in Switzerland, in Lausanne. And of course, everything depends on the places, but especially on the group, because moving together through public space after having discussed and built a source of intimacy, and also having recognized the power of speaking among us. I think what is most interesting for me is really the group dynamic. In many cases, I worked with people that were for the first time, having an exchange in a non-mixed group, a group composed only by women, non-binary and queer people. And so they felt for the first time how, liberating this can be, although it is never a safe space, but, the potential of talking about common experiences and shared experiences, and feeling like these experiences are not individual, they are not subjective, but they are shared, so they are political. So that's for me the most interesting part, and I think that part really builds the connection that you need in order to go out and do things that are also a bit crazy, because together, without feeling the pressure of that complicity is the most powerful thing that we do during Feminist Step, I think. I'm not sure if I have replied to your question, but in Berlin. In Berlin, I really felt that, it was a wonderful group, a big group, and I was really in doubt because I was also a bit afraid that the park, not really the park, but the canal before the park was a bit too much, because the night before I went alone and I was a bit scared. I was not sure that I was like, wow, maybe this is too much, because it is nice also to go to places where you wouldn't be comfortable to go alone, but the idea is that everybody still feel safe, and it is not to put pressure on each other. While finally it was super nice to walk on that path that we discussed together, and actually it was really important also that you were with me, Eirini, for example, in order to discuss this kind of stuff, because I don't live in Berlin, so I have an idea of I knew the area, but from many years ago, and I don't practice that area on a daily basis, and I don't know, sometimes it is always better to be able to discuss. But then what I felt most, because as Lorna was mentioning, there is one of the scores that asked to scream in public space. And I felt that the scream in Berlin was much needed. Much needed. People were like in need of screaming. As if, screaming in public space, which is something that I do a lot, because I go to a lot in demonstration, and I find it so liberating, to feel that this voice is shared, and that message is embodied by so many bodies that are together out there in public space. I had the impression that in Berlin it was needed.
Yeah, I think that's something that I found so impactful between reading between both scores, is the kind of presence of that vocal explosion and then the complete absence of it in the second one, in silent
presence.
Presence.
That's the score that I've written for the book.
Yes.
Starting from the experience of that I had while performing Pauline Olivero's score during the years, I wanted to propose a practice of silence, imagining it as a weapon, silence as a weapon, actually, not as an absence, not as a but collective silence as a choice, as a conscious choice enacted in public space, as a protest, as a refusal, a practice of refusal.
Yeah, silence is as you say in the score, isn't an absence, and it feels very active. If we were all to sit here in silence for the next 20 minutes, it wouldn't feel neutral, would it?
Totally.
And also, I guess, just thinking about what you said around darkness, which is, again, it's not just the absence of light, it's got its own character and its own energy. I guess we could move on to a little reading, if that feels okay.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking to read the silent presence, but maybe I read the other one since you mentioned it, Lorna.
Yeah,
Standing planeuse.
I think
All
I'm
of these courses, disclaimer, all of these courses are actually polyvocal. There are so many quotes inside the text. So maybe I start by mentioning the other voices that are included in the score, which are the voices of Audre Lorde, Anurit Vatta, Adrian Rich, Abita Ronel, Adrienne Marie Brown, and Monique Wittig. The resounding flaneuse for a woman or queer person walking alone in public space. Walk around. Don't pay too much attention to where you go. Let your steps decide for you. Focus on your bodily sounds, your heartbeat, your breath. Can you feel them? How do they sound? Are they audible? Are they masked by the sound of the environment, by the sounds of other bodies? Listen to how your bodily sound intertwine with the surroundings. Listen to how the sounds of the surroundings intertwine with your body. Look for a resonant place, a tunnel, a passage, an arcade. Try to whisper your name. Try to speak it a bit louder. Try to say I. When I'm writing prose, I'm trying to make you understand why I'm screaming. How does your voice propagate in this space? Is there an echo? Is your voice coming back to you in a different shape, resounding in the environment? Echo. How do you swallow the scream? Does this echo carry the trace, the memory of your body, of your throat, of your mouth? The scream of an illegitimate voice. It has ceased to hear itself, therefore it asks itself, how do I exist? Do you remember the last time you opened your mouth and screamed in public space? Sometimes you have to scream to be heard. If you close your eyes, how many screams can you remember? Are they screams of fear? Are they screams of power, of anger, of joy, of pleasure, a choir, collective voices screaming together? Focus on these voices. Recall their resonance. Absorb their energy. Try to say we. I believe our imagination, particularly the part of our imagination that hold what we most desire, what brings us pleasure, what makes us scream yes, are where we must see the future, turn towards justice and liberation, and reprogram ourselves to desire sexually and erotically empowered lives. If all these voices were with yours now, what you would like to scream together? Can you scream it alone, imagining that all these voices are with yours? Mais le temps vient où tu écrases les serpents sous ton pied. Le temps vient où tu peux crier, dresser, plein d'ardeur et de courage. Le paradis est à l'ombre des épées. Exit the tunnel, the passage, or the arcade. Keep walking around. Keep listening to the echo. Bring it with you. The echo of a collective voice, a seed to grow the future. A city full of screams, imaginations, desires, pleasure. Can you imagine it? Can you remember it? Can you start voicing it? Thank you.
Thank you. That was amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elena.
Thank you.
I'm in my work building, which is now very, very quiet as well. So it kind of feels like everything else has gone to sleep, and that just kind of really like filled the building in my mind. So we will now kind of open for any questions that anyone still in the audience would like to ask, or Clem or Eirini, if you have any questions for Elena or Yasmeen as well.
I know, I mean, I wanted to say, yeah, thank you to Yasmeen, thank you to Elena for just, sharing and reading and activating the book again, because I think that is a big intention of the book, to be continuously activated. And as Andrew said, like when you are holding the book, you can kind of see how thick it is, and there is 27 contributions, 27 new commissions. So yeah, there's lots still to be discovered.
I will be interested in what what people are thinking, and also if they have any questions from the whole discussion.
We have a lot of people saying they want to try and get the book, which people definitely should. It's also, there's a lot of translation throughout the book, right, Eirini?
Yes, there are 3 texts, 3 essays translated. They are in both English and German. And then there are some contributions that use both English and German, but they're kind of mixed. But I think the book is primarily in English. So yeah, I think like maybe 75% is in English, maybe 80. I didn't really calculate the percentage, but the big majority of the texts are in English. No, sorry, all of them are in English, but I mean,
Yeah.
some are translated and some
translation.
have some German in it too. Yeah, or some other languages too. But yeah, primarily in English.
And
Yeah,
I guess
and also no, go ahead, Lorna.
I was going to ask a whole new question, so keep with your thought.
No, I just wanted to say something about the interludes. I think the interludes are like a nice experiment in this book, because you need to search a bit for like, it's not always obvious that it's like a new contribution, and they have their own color. They are all in gray, and there are also parts that are like handwritten. There are also sketches. So just to say that they're not all of them are like texts in the strict sense. Some of them invite us to collectively play a game. For example, Harun Morrison's contribution is very much connected to water streams in the city, and because as part of the project he also used this kind of board game to start the walk and to start the conversation going, we thought of including this in the book. So yeah, it's not a score in that case, but it's more like a board game also. It's fun. So yeah.
And I think we've actually just got a really, really interesting question, because it's something that I don't think any of us really touched on during this conversation. But yeah, Elizabeth asks, who works in a rural area, how you see your experiences mapping onto the rural. So anyone can jump in, because I think we're all kind of based in cities. I guess Marseille has good access to nature, but yeah, what are people's thoughts?
I mean, I would say the Dissident Paths was conceptualized for Berlin, but I think the idea of creating dissident paths as a practice can, of course, take place on any terrain and in any context. And again, I think highlighting the togetherness of the work and bringing people together to walk with a dissident purpose, of course, can be also practiced in the rural.
But also, in a way, we explored rurality also within the cities, because part of the project, the idea of what a center is. And actually, for one of the walks, Gabriel Francisco Lemos, a Brazilian musician and also artist, we met outside of the city in Grunewald, which is a very rural area. When I say rural, like not even like, it's like in the middle of the woods basically. And we went for like a 5-hour walk foraging mushrooms. So also we actually wanted to touch a bit upon like practices connected to nature and to like non-urban practices of walking. I mean, this was not maybe like the main focus of the project, but even in the book, we have a piece on foraging, and Gabriel wrote a new piece around that. And also he included three scores that he always uses as part of his foraging walks. So yeah, maybe it's not like it will be interesting actually to bring this notion of walking and even dissidence, more outside of the cities. But I think, as Clem said, also we wanted to respond to the urgencies of, Berlin as a context, in the way that we were experiencing it, at least.
Yeah, I think there's also something to be said for barriers to walking in rural spaces. I mean, that it's not that they don't exist in cities, but Black and brown people of color walking or feeling welcome in rural spaces is definitely something that I know there's lots of people doing really important work, but it does mean that the kind of access to rural natural spaces, there is a kind of a privilege in that access, or there's a kind of systemic access. Yeah.
Maybe I can jump in because I'm really a countryside girl. I grew up in a village of 250 inhabitants in North Italy. And yeah, someone was saying in the chat that actually this narrative about the dangers of public space at night are the same in the countryside as in the city, and I totally agree. It's just a generalized narrative that aims to disempower, women and other minorities in outside from the home, which is the space that traditionally was imagined as the space for women. So I actually had the occasion to do feminist steps, not really in total rurality, not really in the countryside, but in smaller, town or villages. As I said, in San Martino, Valle Caudina, or Lascio de Fond, where actually the borders between the city and the countryside are really easy to reach and to experience during a walking tour. And yes, I do feel that that kind of practice can be totally articulated with the countryside, because to me it is not a narrative between private space and urban space. It is a narrative between private space and outside, which is gendered.
Yeah. I'm just reflecting on my experience growing up in the suburbs, which is kind of walking is just not something that anyone does, and everyone drives everywhere. And I'm imagining doing any of these kind of scores there, it would feel really quite like radical. And it's like you're kind of always next to a motorway. In the UK, I guess the rural is quite like it's so many things. It's like working class farmer families, it's elite landowners, it's rural spaces are, for some countries, the majority of people. But yeah, I guess one final quick question. There's been a really nice comment about encountering things unexpected. I guess maybe we could just close with everyone sharing something that has been unexpected from a walk, from a school, from the project, something unexpected that has been encountered.
Well, maybe, as part of Dissident Paths, we realized that, kids are the best audience. Okay, I'm kidding. I mean, we just had an after party that was on a Saturday morning, and it was led by two artists who shape a collective, which is called multiple S's. And they are part of let's say a queer community, and we were expecting to have like multiple queer people around. And because it was Saturday morning, even though it was an after party and it wasn't public space, then I think kids on the streets kind of convinced their parents that they needed to watch this. So it was a very funny and fun and I don't know, unexpected audience of ours. And overall, I feel like in our project we just had all kinds of like people joining us, and it felt like at the end we shaped a small community of walkers, because then at the end some of them came and said, oh yeah, I went to this walk and this walk, and some of them also were new to the city, so it was a way for them to actually meet new people, but us actually also learn more about the city itself because we went to unexpected places. So yeah.
Amazing. Kim?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of a chat going on about also those conversations that you have with people on the street or on a bike, or and how actually maybe being in a car is different. And well, across the 23 walks, we had some that were registered and had specific amounts of people that were able, and others that are a bit more open and kind of like seeing who turned up. And I always enjoyed it when we would be starting and you don't really know who's going to join. It could be that 2 people turn up, it could be that 30 people turn up. And then also sort of sometimes just having someone come over saying, what are you doing? And then joining the walk and coming along with us along the way and staying till the end. And yeah, those unexpected guests, I think, was a very nice element of the project.
Yeah, amazing. Elena, any kind of unexpected encounters?
I mean, during the project in Berlin or in general?
Either.
Because I will say that the project is really not based on expectations, because it is always open to encounters both with places and groups. That it's difficult to to remark something which is unexpected, because I always arrive with quite a few expectation and open to the fact that things might change when you work also in public space and through walking. It may rain, it may start to rain in the middle of the thing, so you really need to adapt yourself and to be really open to what will be there.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the most classic
maybe,
things to happen on the walk. So it doesn't.
Yeah, that's the thing. But maybe one of the most unexpected encounters, not in a good sense, that I had during Feminist Step was actually in Athens, when there was this guy who was following us. Actually, it is the only time it happened. Well, I mean, you could imagine that it happens often in someone who just follow a group, but the fact that we are a group usually prevent this kind of situation, I think. While in Athens, it happened, for example.
Thankfully, it was only the once, and Yasmeen, any final reflections? And I'm aware we're a little bit over time, but maybe
I think, not as a surprise, but also just wanted to say how fantastic it feels to work with like-minded people. That's always very rewarding, and that also counted for the audience and for all of them organizers. How it just felt really like we were floating on a balloon together, and it all made sense. And that's a reminder to really try as much as we can to work with like-minded people, and to work with people we like and with people we feel. And yeah, that's the most surprising, is how good it feels to be embraced and to be really listened to. to have things really working in that sense, because the unexpected is there, and of course, working in public is always hard and it's always really soliciting. But yeah, it was just very smooth how it worked for me to be. I felt held, and there was that was very rewarding and really made my year somehow. It was really, yeah, it's just a reminder how important that is.
I think that's a really nice place to wrap up on, and letting the poet kind of have the final words is it relieves me of having to do too much summing up. But yeah, thank you so much, Yasmeen, Elena, Eirini, Clementine, and Andrew for having us. And yeah, thank you all so much for joining. It's been a really lovely evening.